Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, theater, and entertainment. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Chris Lowell, who's currently starring in the film Promising Young Woman. And I wanted to begin by diving into the overall tone of the film because you had some initial apprehension about not necessarily knowing what direction tonally the film was going to go in. And one of the things that Emerald Fennell does so fantastically in this film is really have such a mix. You know, there's a lot of deep drama, there's comedic elements. So how did those first conversations with her really square out for you exactly where your character fit into the story and what this mix of tones was going to be and what you needed to bring into who Al was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I remember getting the script, and when I read it, I didn't see any comedy. To me, it was just this extraordinarily disturbing, brilliant piece of writing. And I remember my first day on set, talking with Carrie, and getting to know her and asking her like, what was it about the script that drew her to it and this character. And Carrie was just like, well, everything I do is so dark and dreary, and this is so funny and crazy. And I'm like looking through my script being like, this is funny. And then Emerald, the subject matter of this film is so heavy and very weighted and difficult. And I think it could very easily have been absorbed by a similar atmosphere on set. And instead, Emerald was just full of levity. I mean, she was constantly making jokes and trying to get a rise out of people, and just kept it really light. And I actually think that really benefited the film in general, just because it I think allowed us also to take more risks, to not feel like we were being disrespectful to the material, to really feel like Emerald had an idea of what she wanted that was very specific, and that we just needed to give her what she wanted and she would do the rest. And it was amazing. I mean, really, it wasn't until I do think my scene in the film is definitely where things stop being funny. But I remember, doing all my scenes with Carrie and just being exhausted emotionally at the end of every day because they're really taxing. And then my first day with Max Greenfield and seeing the choices Max was making, I was like doing double takes. I was like, are we in the same film? You know what I mean? And I think that's the brilliance of Emerald's style, is that there are moments in this movie where you are literally watching through your fingers, and then 5 seconds later you are like laugh out loud howling. It's crazy that those two things can coexist, and I think it really just speaks to her talent as a filmmaker that she was able to combine those two extremes.
And you were mentioning the specificity of the choices that she makes throughout the entire film. And we see that at every level. It's like the minute detail of the nail polish that she has Carrie wearing, down to
Absolutely.
the larger locations and production design elements. And so, particularly as you were figuring out a lot of the details of who your character was, how did her very specific idea of this character really help you in finding him?
Yeah, it's always such a gift when you get to work with a director who really knows how to communicate with actors. And Emerald, being an actor herself, like definitely knows how to give notes that I think are applicable. Oftentimes directors will talk kind of in these bigger ideas or concepts, which is great, but as an actor, it's difficult to hear that and know how to apply that to this line in this scene. And Emerald, I think, is very specific in that way and very good at giving notes that you can apply without feeling like you're just a puppet for her to manipulate. Like, she really also invites your input and your interpretation. With regards to Al, my character, you're hearing about this guy throughout the movie, and you're hearing about him as you're meeting all of these real scumbags. So there's this assumption that by the time you meet Al, he's going to be the worst of the worst. And that was something that Emerald was, I think, excited about. She knew that that's where it was headed. And she wanted to counter that. So she was like, when we meet you, I want you to be the nicest guy we've met in the movie so far, to really jolt and thwart the expectations of the audience. So what I think is so brilliant about the writing in that, at least at the beginning with Al, is we expect him to be this just colossal piece of shit. And actually, when you meet him, he's seemingly a really nice guy. He didn't want a stripper. He tells her, hey, listen, I don't want to do anything crazy. I love my fiance. It's like all of the, by this point in the movie, the audience should be like foaming at the mouth. They want this guy dead. And now we're meeting him and he's being like polite and he doesn't want to be a scumbag. And how are we supposed to feel about this character now? And wait a minute, should she kill him? Or, it just really flips everything. So Emerald was really hell-bent on that. And also I remember my costume fitting, looking at these slacks they're having me in and these polo shirts and just being like, don't put me in. Like, this is so gross. It's so frat boy. And they're like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it's meant to be. And then I think when she was creating the scene in the bachelor party, she also really wanted that to feel as gross and testosterone drenched as possible. So we have sweat all over us and under our armpits. I mean, I think she really wanted to like make it feel just this toxic masculinity that you could literally see. Those were the many things that she was throwing my way,
She also made such an interesting choice that she never wanted the men who we're seeing behave in this way at different scenes throughout the movie to have anything that they could use as an excuse. So it's like they're never drunk. And if we look at the bachelor party scene, when Carrie's there pouring liquor shots in everyone's mouth, your character isn't in the center of that. He's not actually completely drunk and intoxicated when they go upstairs together. So he can't use the excuse for what happens later as like, I was drunk, I didn't know what I was doing.
Exactly.
And so it's really interested in the specificity of that choice for you.
Well, and I think also instead, the excuse that you are hearing me say are a slew of excuses that we've heard repeatedly to justify the behavior of predators in the past, which is, this happened years ago. We were kids. And can you imagine how horrible it would be to be accused of something like that, as if that's the worst thing that could happen to anyone in this circumstance, And I think laying bare those excuses one after the next really is effective in seeing the way that we've come to depend on them as a society to justify this horrible behavior that we see, propagated throughout politics and entertainment and, all facets of our culture. And I think for a long time, it's because it was rewarded. I mean, how many movies have we seen where like, it's awesome that we're spying on the girls in the shower or, making date rape jokes in like John Hughes movies, it's something that has been existing in our culture and in our entertainment for decades. And I think Emerald does such a brilliant job of having those same jokes exist, but in a completely different context and forcing us to examine them in a very different light. I mean, think about what happens in that scene with Carrie, spoiler alert. Can we talk about this? Is this okay?
We can do a spoiler alert because you just said it out loud. So
okay,
I think that
spoiler
works.
alert.
Go watch the film, come back.
yes. So, when she dies, then the movie becomes Al and his friend trying to get rid of this like dead prostitute, which is like a thing that happens in so many like bro comedies. And it's a fun thing to see. Ha ha ha. What are they going to do with this body? Only now we're seeing it from the perspective of the woman who's just been murdered. And it suddenly forces you to think about why you ever thought that was a funny thing in the first place. And not only that, but like, you've seen this as a funny concept repeatedly. And I just think that's just one of the many ways that Emerald very brilliantly is forcing us as an audience to really hold a mirror up to ourselves and examine how accountable we are for behavior like this continuing to exist.
And, you were bringing up that whole thing that he keeps using the excuse of we were kids and thinking that gives him a pass. Did you make a character choice for yourself about whether he genuinely 100% wholeheartedly believes that, or whether deep down he does kind of know what he did at the time?
There was definitely a choice that Emerald made that he never apologizes, that he never even acknowledges, he never uses the word rape. He just won't even go near it. And I think for me, the way that I sort of approached it was as somebody who has done enough self-manipulation, self-justification to have completely convinced himself that something else happened to justify why he hasn't been held accountable, why he does continue to be able to live a fun, fruitful, prosperous life, that he is a good guy now. So, maybe he wasn't then, but now he's a decent person. And so that should justify that should make us not have to dig too deep about the person that he once was. And I think this whole movie is about accountability. This whole movie is about forcing these guys to acknowledge and be forced to deal with these behaviors. And the thing that I think is so brilliant also is the one person who does is Alfred Molina's character. And that's the one person who is essentially spared. He's the one man in the movie who acknowledges what he did, recognizes how horrible it was, and asks for forgiveness, apologizes, is trying to atone for his sins. And I think that is something that so few of these guys that we've seen in society are capable of doing, which is pathetic.
And with that lack of accountability for the fact that he did commit a rape, there's also that moment where he initially in the conversation with Cassie, he blames Nina, and then he starts blaming Cassie for what's happening now. And so it kind of feels like he is a character who his entire life has gotten a pass on a lot of things. So did you think about him overall as someone who, whenever he messes up, there's always people there to cover up for him and to help him move past it, where he doesn't have to take that accountability at all?
I think that from like a bird's eye view, yes, I think that's exactly what's going on. I mean, that's literally what happens. The next day, Max Greenfield comes in and basically helps him. Is the sort of symbolically is that society swooping in to help cover up another mistake that he's made, another awful thing that he's done. In the moment, I can't think that way, right? I have to, when I'm thinking about my character, I have to think that what I'm doing is the right thing to do. And so what I would do going into these scenes is really just take that note from Emerald of, I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy who loves his wife, who's excited to be married, who's someone who helps the old lady carry her groceries up the steps and lets people, in front of him and in traffic, and it's just a stand-up guy. And then let Carrie's character basically peel back all the layers and slowly, over the course of that very agonizingly long scene, expose him and force him to, account for these things that he's trying so hard to pretend never happened.
And there's such a myriad of directions that your character goes in during that confrontation scene when he's tied up to the bed. He's going through a complete fight or flight. It's like he tries to talk his way out of it. He bursts into tears at one point. At one point, he's trying to figure out how he can escape and retaliate. So how did you really work on all of the different specifics and the different responses that he's going to have as she starts telling him different things and holding him accountable for his actions?
Well, that is definitely, I think, first and foremost, like a testament to the writing, right? For a scene to last that long and still be suspenseful, there have to be different tactics that this person's trying. You know what I mean? That's one of the things I love about how the scene plays out, is that Carrie is just totally rock solid. She is not changing. She is just slowly turning the temperature up and up and up, and isn't breaking a sweat. And on the other side of that is me, who is going from begging, okay, that's not going to work, to making light of it. Okay, that's not going to work either. To empathize with me, please. That's not going to work. To, it's like what happens to Al is that over the course of that scene, he becomes so unhinged. Every single tool he has ever used to get what he wants is not working. And it drives him to the point of madness, to the point of he has nothing left but violence. And I think, again, the masterstroke of Emerald is there's no violence in this film up until this point. Cassie seeks revenge on these people, but it's not by shooting them or setting a bomb off or whatever you see in normal revenge movies. It's by simply exposing them to the people that they've become, right? And in this scene is the first time that we see a weapon when she takes the scalpel out. And I think for Emerald, it was important for her to communicate this idea that statistically, when a weapon is involved, the woman loses. The man is going to overpower her. And so as much as we want to see Cassie kill Al or mutilate him or get that violent vengeance that we've been foaming at the mouth for, that's just not how it would go. And I think she wanted to show us that in this scene, and that brutal sequence that we don't cut away from. This is the violence we as an audience have been hoping for the whole time. And yet when it arrives, it's so painful to watch because it's so painful to watch.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about that scene because I know that Emerald originally had stunt people to step into that scene, but Carrie especially was like, let's just do it ourselves. And like you said, the camera stays completely focused on the two of them during that entire time, which is what makes it so uncomfortable. And so how did the two of you work with Emerald on even just choreographing that scene and really creating it to such a level of intensity together?
It was very difficult and exhausting. I remember the stunt coordinator telling us, normally when you shoot stunts, whether you have a stunt double or not, it's very technical and very specific, right? So you're just perfecting this one fall or this one punch. And, normally scenes with stunts are chopped together a million different ways. And as a result, you have an opportunity to, reset, take a breather, do it again. And this was uninterrupted. And I remember the stunt coordinator telling us, you were going to be bone tired at the end of each one of these takes because you can't cut away. And it is a constant, real, aggressive, ugly, messy struggle. And Emerald, in talking about it, was approached Carrie and I and was like, I've heard that it takes 2 minutes for someone to die of asphyxia. So we're just going to roll for 2 minutes and I'm going to yell out every 30 seconds so Carrie knows when to die. And hearing that, you're like, you're going to do what? And it was brutal. I mean, it was exhausting. And and we did it 4 times. We did that sequence 4 times. And I remember what would happen is we would be struggling. We would do the fight. And then once I would get the pillow over her face, the first AD would yell, time. And then we would just be struggling. And he would yell 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. And at 90 seconds was when Carrie was sort of supposed to run out of steam. And we did it the first time. And Emerald's like, that was great. Let's just do one more for safety. And we did it the second time. And she was like, that was even better. Let's see if we can do one more. And then we did it the third time. And at 90 seconds, there was a problem with the camera, which was devastating. So we reset. And then we did it a 4th time. And on the 4th time, I actually started smothering Carrie for real. We just had a hiccup in our, it's very, it's a lot's going on. And we had obviously we'd worked out a signal with our stunt coordinator to know, because the other thing that's strange is it's hard to yell for help when the scene is someone yelling for help. Do you know what I'm saying? And so Carrie at one point lightly taps me on the leg, and I remember immediately getting off the pillow, and she sat up and just tears exploded out of her eyes. I think not because she just the physicality of that, it was terrifying. I mean, that's one of those sequences where emotionally, but almost more physically, the physicality of it almost takes over. You know what I mean? That kind of does the acting for you. I mean, because it is so traumatizing and exhausting and physiological that it it pulls from you an emotional response that is, I think, very authentic because you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And flipped out.
And then following that scene, the next scene that we go into with Al is obviously his wedding. And I thought that was an interesting detail for us to see, you know, who are the people that are present beyond the guys that we've already seen at the bachelor party. And did you look at that wedding as something where his wife, Anastasia, has made all of the choices of what type of wedding is it going to be? What's it going to look like? How is it going to be decorated? What are we wearing? Or did you feel like there were any aspects of that wedding that Al had a hand in and a say in that told you details about him?
Oh, I actually think that it was entirely a wedding that Anastasia planned, and that tells me as much as I need to know about the kind of person that Al is. You know what I mean? I think that the only thing Al cared about, the only thing that his groomsmen cared about was the bachelor party. You know what I mean? And he's letting his wife and the women throw together this flowery, silly, stupid, symbolic wedding that, you know, he's giving to her as a gift because he's such a nice guy. You know, I mean, I think that the repulsion in that kind of misunderstanding of prioritization speaks volumes about that character and the culture that he's grown up in.
On a separate direction, I actually wanted to ask you about when you directed your first feature, because one of the things that you said was that as a director, you really wanted to be able to communicate with the actors that you were working with in a way that you wished directors had worked with you and communicated with you some of the time. So I wanted to ask you about what specifically that stylistic approach of communication was that you really wanted to bring into being a filmmaker.
It's sort of what I spoke to earlier, which is I think so often when directors talk to actors, there's usually two different kinds of things that can happen. One is they'll give you a direction that feels like it's entirely theory driven, and it's very difficult to apply that direction to a scene. You know, when you start talking about like what's going on in the movie or in the scene itself or in this character that you see as a director, that might all be really interesting information, but that's very difficult to try and like put into a line. Whereas if a director is able to say, get her to laugh, you have to get this person to laugh in the scene, get her to hug you, get her to start crying, break her heart. Those are things where it's like, okay, I can infuse that into every line. I'm going to try and make you laugh with every line. It gives you somewhere to go. The other thing that happens that I can't stand as an actor is when a director essentially treats you like a human prop, where they give you a line reading, they tell you exactly how they want you to say it and when, and you feel very claustrophobic in those worlds where you feel like you can't bring anything of yourself, any of your own interpretation to the character. And so I always love looking at a scene and thinking about as an actor how I would want to approach it. And when I see an actor having difficulty with a scene or a moment, or when they're unable to, you know, give me what I'm looking for, is really thinking about what can I say to this person that they can immediately apply to the scene in a way that doesn't shut down their momentum and their creativity, but hopefully like lights it up even more. You know what I mean? Turns the volume up on it, really lets them feel like they can discover it themselves. And Emerald is spectacular at that. I mean, she was so specific with what she wanted, but again, wasn't doing it in a way where I felt like I was just a puppet that needed to just, that essentially it was just my facade of a person that was doing the work, you know? And so, yeah, I think that is my approach to, and, you know, actors need different things. And I think oftentimes a director will bring one singular approach to each actor. And there are some actors who I think need to be coddled, who need to be constantly reminded that they're doing a good job. They need that kind of encouragement. There are other actors that need to be left alone. There are some actors that are purely technical. They want you to tell them faster, slower, louder, quieter. You know what I mean? Like in very practical terms. And I think learning your actors needs and how to communicate with them and what they want and what they thrive off of is also like a really important part of the process.
Yeah. And then, obviously one of the unfortunate things from the last year is your role in Glow and the fact that we're no longer going to get that final season of the series. And
I know.
I just wanted to ask, like, what is it that you're going to miss the most about playing that character on screen? Because he was such a wonderful complexity in a show that had such a mix of tones and was so special.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It breaks my heart that we don't get to finish telling that story. Just because that was one of those jobs when I would show up at work every day and just kind of be shocked that I got to do that. Again, that's another example of a show that can have hysterical, laugh out loud, over the top comedic elements, and then in the next scene have like extraordinarily somber, difficult, existential conversations. And the fact that I got to kind of play in both those sandboxes is just something that you just don't really get to do very often. I think the thing I'm going to miss the most about it is really working with all those people. Working with Betty Gilpin and Mark and Allie and all the girls, Kate Nash, and really Liz and Carly, the creators. Just the environment that was created on that show was just so special and unique, and it was a thing that when you were there, you just knew it was fleeting, and I thought we all thought, and I think we're really banking on being able to kind of take that last season to really sort of take a victory lap on the environment that we had created. And it's in comparison one of the very, very low casualties of this pandemic. But from a creative standpoint, it's sad for it to have gone. I will miss it dearly.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry that we didn't get that final season, and we'll join any online ranks that push for any sort of movie conclusion that comes together.
Okay, sounds good. You and me both.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation today, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.